Disclaimer: the information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of Gans processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
So thank you everyone for joining us on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is the KAKT American Knowledge Team meeting of 2025, and you are all part of the team. As you know, we're broadcasting on 6 continents. We still haven't heard from the 7th. But nevertheless, we will carry on, and I thank you all for being here. This is the KAKT Foundation Spaceship Institute, Teachings on Plasma Science. We are discussing the basic Gans tech. Gans matter is our subject today. My name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is October the 12th of 2025, and this is part of the KAKT Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. So we have been trying to distill the knowledge into bite-sized pieces, and shockingly, we have numerous bite-sized pieces. So here we are in the 6th of a series on Gans tech, where we were discussing the popcorn Gans and how it's polyatomic. There was a direction of flow. What does the epitome of love mean, and how does that affect the Gans affinity? And then, of course, what everybody is concerned about is the Gans matter. And this is why we've been trying to put it in such a manner that you as individual knowledge seekers have the capability of interpreting in your own words the knowledge and being able to pass that on to others. That not only is ideal, but in many ways it's a duty, because we have been ascribed as fallen angels, and we're now beginning to question that, simply because, like a dike, there are many holes in the dike, and it's leaking, and so is our knowledge. And unfortunately, many of the irregularities and anomalies that we've experienced in life have gone unanswered for so long, but they are being resolved today. It's all thanks to Marantava Kolikesh and his understanding of nuclear physics. He's described in book number 1, The Universal Order of the Creation of Matter. And it seems to be intimately tied into Gans matter. And there is a reason for that, because of its pivotal point, because we happen to be existent in our physicality, and we have been conditioned to what you see is what you get. And so it's hard to see when it's dark. So we need the light. And in book number 2, we understand that there's a structure of the light. And this is very important, because we have the universal order of creation of matter, but we have the light going from one matter to another matter. And this has been difficult to understand for many of us, because we're operating in the singularity of our physicality. And so when we see the repercussions of book number 3, The Origin of the Universe, we see that singularity break up into a duality. And we have the sister universe and our man's universe. And of course, we seem to be intimately familiar with man's universe, except for the fact that it's only one dot, one little tiny, tiny speck in man's universe. That's our Earth space. And even that, in terms of our reference, is even tinier than that. And, we historically have been looked upon as cave dwellers. And now we cherish the fact that we can live in condominiums, which are really nothing more than glorified caves, wouldn't you say? And then, of course, there's the rest of the universe, which we know a very little about. And we are coming to a frightful situation where that lack of knowledge is creating a fright. So the point of the matter is that there are other visitors, and for 399 weeks in a row, Rick Crammond and the Universal Council of Earth have tried to bring the one planet, one nation, one race for justice and world peace together, so that we have an understanding that our fingerprint with respect to our soul and our emission spectrum indicates that we are the humanity race of the Earth space. And from that perspective, the color of our skin is irrelevant. And in fact, our position on Earth space is also irrelevant. We are the major part of the humanity species on this planet. And we, as I say, we have been described as fallen because we didn't understand the plasma rule. We seem to believe that the higher strength eats the weaker strength, whereas in the plasma science, the higher strength feeds the weaker strength. So fundamentally, this exposes a conflict point. But a conflict point in another point of view is a binding zone, because it could bring two armies together, or it could bring two fields together, or it could bring two points of view together. And depending on the field strength, and there are various field strengths, and they come in different states of energy. Each time we come into a manifestation that increases the density, that becomes part of the inertia density manifestation process. And to understand that process is to understand the nature of physicality. So that means that the physicality is a concluding process of inertia density manifestation. It is part of energy binding. And this is extremely important because it's self-serving. And no one cares for your self-serving needs more than you do. And when you abdicate that responsibility, it is confounding to understand the logic behind that, because that self-serving binding is your dimension point. But many of us have grown accustomed to that self-serving energy arriving at the expense of others. Well, if you think about it, the others are also having energy binding needs that are self-serving. And now, from what we understand in the plasma science, we're already in a 20% deficiency. And if someone else is stealing our energy, then we are already in a diminishing, further diminishing dimension point. And so we have two options. Either we create a conflict with those who are stealing it, or we can create a conflict from those who maybe we decide to rob from. And so when we understand this falling principle, we tend to connect this by gravity. And the easiest way to understand that in practical terms is practices that mountain people will do for agriculture, and that it would be terracing. And so the water movement would come from a higher and fall to a lower body of water. And this would be done by terracing, and it follows through as a falling gradient. And the higher the flow and the higher the distance, the higher the gradient. And so this is the basic thing that has to do with angular density. So the whole context or the pretext of falling is to have increased density, increased pressure, therefore increased gravity. And of course, our arrival as fallen angels, it gives us an increased dependence on the earth space feeding. So we have this internal popcorn pressure of Gans tensity because angular momentum is conserved. So somehow, some way, we have ballooned into human beings the way we would blow up a balloon or a bag. And so we end up being bags of Gans. And that's what this session has been all about. But we have begun with a deficiency. And so we are really seeking a vitality enhancement because we have been brought up with the notion that when you get to be old, you get to be decrepit. But this is, flying in the face of the current trend where you can get to be young and decrepit. So age and physical condition are not necessarily tied together in the same sentence. So it all depends on the vitality. And so we brought in the Universal Body Enhancement Unit, which gives us an energy vitality, energy enhancement through increasing the vitality of our emotional and physical construct. And this is worth gold because, well, let's face it, humanity is worth gold. So it's just unfortunate when someone sees us as honey and they want our honey. And they do this almost at any kind of method that you wish, everything from lying, cheating, and stealing to deceit. And this is why weekly I keep harping on this missing commandment, number 11, thou shalt not lie. But why thou shalt not lie? Well, it actually plays into the self-serving needs of those who are doing it at the expense of others. The problem with the lying is that if you think that you're fooling someone, guaranteed who you're not fooling is yourself, because you obviously created the lie and you know that it's a lie. And the worst part about it is that some people, they tend to believe their lies. They lie so much that the lie becomes normal. And that's one of the things we found with the Gans. Gans brings about truthfulness. And that's why there is no poker playing in outer space, because you can't bluff. This is the truth seeker's dilemma. You have an accountability to the self. And if you see that someone is lying, you have a choice to either accuse them or shield yourself from them. Obviously, if you confront them, well, that would be a conflict point. But the liar's dilemma, you see, is even worse because they have an accountability to their own soul. So either you quit lying or suffer the consequences. And that's the whole point. There are consequences, and you can delay the consequences as much as you want, but it is inescapable because it's all part of the Loosh dilemma. So the Loosh harvesting is a single-minded intention to steal your honey. And as such, that becomes part of the hive mind intention. So as we look at bees in a hive, their intention is to produce the honey. But, another way the hive mind works is to steal the honey. And so that is all determined by the Gans intention, because the Gans intention is truthful to your inner space. So that is something that you cannot lie about. And this is what's holding us back from getting to the transmutation highway, because our reputation precedes us. We are on the basic carbon 12 highway, which is the transmission highway, which involves frequency, heat, and pressure. And then there's the carbon 14 highway, which is the transition highway, which allows us to connect to other resources. And the greatest resource is the transmutation highway, because that allows us to experience and recreate the method of transport that was of our original choice. Yeah, we made that choice and we chose to be born. And yet the moment we were born, we reject that mode of transportation and we revert to the lowest common denominator. And when we say the lowest common denominator, any denominator could be the lowest, but we choose the lowest of the lowest. And this is the confounding nature of the humanity. And we were actually confronted with the pandemic. And so when we produced the cups of life, we had to understand that we were not choosing the lowest of the lowest, but we were enlisting the services of the nanocoding process of the monatomic science, which reflected our core space, our inner space. We thought that that was a nebulous point. Well, in some ways, it was, except that it represented our emotional strength. When you say, well, how can you have strong emotion? Strength is usually attributed to physicality. So we have the cup of physicality and we have the cup of emotion, and those two work together. So that's the basic understanding of the plasma science as it relates to Gans production. And we were able to create carbon dioxide, calcium carbonate, zinc, copper, water, amino acid Gans. And now we're in the era where we could actually have the Gans radiance manifestation of gold. And it is worth gold, not at the price that we're paying for it today. There are other values to gold that we haven't even explored. And then we see the cup relationships of our Earth space, which is full of minerals, and our existence on the Earth space is full of many humans. And all of these are part of another cup relationship, which is the interaction of our soul radiance from the cup of soul and the Earth. And then, of course, the Earth represents our environment, and the environment is the inertia density manifestation of the representation that is coming from the universe. And the intermediary there, of course, is our brain. And the brain has two hemispheres that represent the coming together of three fields: the copper, which is physical, the zinc, which is emotional, and the carbogen, which is the connection of the carbon 14 to the universe. And we have a product. And it isn't the sum of the three, but we have a physical body attached to this one track cup of the universe. So we keep the one, we keep the other one, and we keep another one. And then we have a product that is more than three because this is a continual process of existence. So there's a giving and taking of energy, and we've seen that with the nanocoding process because we were able to align the nanocoding. But we started with a copper wire and we nanocoated it with a carbon nanocrystal. And that seemed strange at the time, but one thing that we had to do was get a field alignment so that we could get a directionality that was aligned with the magnetical gravitational field strengths. And it wasn't just point to point, but the magnetical field circumnavigated the gravitational field, which was at the core of the inertia point. The inertia point being the bringing together of two fields. And then we have to understand that the conservation of energy is the bringing together of these two fields. And when you do that, you create this MAGRAV energy transfer state. And why that is important, because it allows us to port the energy to go from, say, a Gans state of magnetical forces to a Gans state of gravitational forces and have an equilibrium. but also it can go from a Gans state to a nanostate, or it can go from a Gans state to an atomic state. Either way, all three are part of this, what we call the pico turning points, because they're all part of the physicality of the nanocoating process. And we saw that, oddly enough, with the pico coating, which aligned itself in the gaps of the nanocoating. So the nanocoating we said was monatomic, but interestingly enough, when we look at the pico popcorn, it's kind of just like the Gans popcorn, except that the pico popcorn is roundish, but it has many, many points. So although the pico is 3 orders of magnitude smaller than the nanocoating, the Gans is way bigger and it has the same characteristic. So how do we go from something that's supremely tiny to something that is now visible in the matter state? And this is the Gans matter phenomenon. So what we see is the Gans popcorn, where the charges emanate perpendicularly, and of course, the magnetical charges are negative. And so these represent the field forces that are coming from the gravitational forces, which are positive in the core. The gas is in the center. And so what we have is a Gans explosion, if you will, so that the size of the Gans is way bigger than the size of the nanocoating. And because it has so many more points, it is even stronger. It's like a supreme team effort. So when we look at the Earth and we see how round it is, we could say, well, the Earth matter is like a nanoparticle in its physicality. But the fact of the matter is that it is a product of the Gans matter. And the Gans matter is omnidirectional. It is giving energy magnetically in all directions. And of course, it puffs up. And so this would explain why the Earth is rather round. And so we can now understand better what our original atomic understanding was, where the atoms are linked together and it's very physical, just like a caterpillar. But now we understand that it's polyatomic, which means it's unchained, but there still is a binding force. And when we did with the nanocoating, it was all uniform carbon nanocoating. But then when we introduced the GANs, we started to introduce other elements. And so we find that the method of binding is the same. It's polyatomic, and it becomes, in fact, molecular. And this allows us to understand that hydrogen of itself is not singular. Hydrogen is not just hydrogen, but it is a molecule with a covalent bond. And so this hydrogen has to come from a source, which means that it has to have a Magrav-like condition. And we see that the carbon-14 is a field connection and the carbon-60 is a connection to the universe. But, how big is large? Well, beyond the universe is the unicos, and then, of course, there's the creator. And so we see that all of these rules that apply to the hydrogen are applying to everything else. So we look at the orthohydrogen, which has the polarity in the same direction, and the parahydrogen, which has the poles opposite. In both cases, they're balanced off because there's a pair on the North Pole and a pair on the South Pole. The thing is, they come in pairs. And so we see the polyatomic Gans is the same way. So when we talk about the carbon dioxide, we started with copper and zinc and water and salt water, and we created CO2. The zinc oxide, we created ZnO2. And with the copper oxide, we created CuO. And they all involved a nanocoating, whether it was a nanocoated copper or a nanocoating zinc. And so this was the basic understanding of plasma science as chemistry. But there was a charge, there was polar energy that was emitted magnetically, and there was a gravitational charge that was absorbed on the other pole. And in between, we had a rotating field. And that rotating field could change its speed, could change its strength. And of course, it had to have a change in its direction because obviously, if it was emitting, it would keep emitting. But if it's absorbing, well, obviously, there's another approach for that charge. So the charge is not the substance. The charge is the direction of flow. All charges are positive. You cannot have a negative charge because it's always positive. It's like heat. You have abundance of heat, and cold is an absence of heat. So negative charge would actually be an absence of a charge. So the charge is representative of the direction of flow. And there have been many arguments on this particular point, and it stems back to many of the fundamental methods of education. But, when we're dealing with the plasma reality, we have to wake up to the reality that charges are emitted and charges are absorbed, and this is a two-way street. And we know this because we've been able to create Ganses of all the Earth Ganses. We have a grand central station of all the various Ganses in their field strength, in their color, and in their attributes. The most important one, of course, is their masses. So when we put a periodic table together of physical matter, these identify the Earth space range details. And so those range details represent the fundamental hydrogen, which has interestingly enough, an atomic mass of 1, and it goes right on up. And there are many that are in between. And so we've discussed the basic amino acid, the carbon, the nitrogen, and the oxygen, but we're also looking at the physicality of the copper and the emotional strength of the zinc. And now we've been able to create gold. And, isn't that interesting when iron is an important component for us? And then we realize all of these details are part of our physicality. So we can't ignore any one of them because we are all part of this physicality on this physical Earth space. So it all stems from the star core component, which is the magnetical gravitational relationship of the star formation. And there is that gradient charge that's represented by the gradient between the magnetical and the gravitational charge. So that is fundamental, but that is a singularity. When we look at the relationship with another star core gradient, then the relationship changes because one becomes a magnetical gradient charge and the other becomes a gravitational gradient charge. So we still have the gradient between the magnetical and gravitational fields, but now we're taking into account the interdependence of the universe. And of course, we have many points of view. And so when we have 2 points of view, we have to say, well, are those points conflict or are they a binding zone? And so when we look at the Gans inertia point, what it does is it creates a Gans containment that is more gravitational. So that becomes another point of view. And so we have changed that gravitational gradient charge. And we did that with the cups of life. So when we're looking at these binding points, these are all gravitational falling binding points. That's an arbitrary point of view. From there, we see that there are many loose ends, and apparently they're terminal ends because we have a tendency to just look at our physical point of view, ignoring the fact that we are a product of two other fields. And we're not going to do that anymore because we need to understand that there are other factors that come into play. So our physical point is a gravitational inertia point. That is the manifestation points of view. And there are many points of view, and all of them are fundamental turning points because they represent different inertia points of the star cores of 2 points of view. And all of them have this relationship between the gravitational and magnetical, or the magnetical and the gravitational. And fundamentally, they become a gravitational inertia point. So what's missing here is the magnetical point, isn't that? So when we look at these inertia gradients, do we have to understand they're susceptible to increase or decrease? Well, if the gravitational one is susceptible, then the magnetical one is also susceptible. And so now you have the changeability. This is where these turning points come into play. So the concept of duality has to come into play here. So we can understand the 2 points, how they are connected in tandem. They work as a partnership. We call it the twinity. But that's a twinity that we see as the base of the gravitational construct. But when we look at ray motion, we have to understand that each side of this ray motion is a relationship between natural creation and natural decay. It is decay that is the unfortunate word here because it implies a kind of degradation. And in fact, that is true. We know, for instance, that nature will take care of roadkill in 9 days, and it'll do that on its own. And how it is that the bacteria that we have in our gut, which facilitates natural creation, decides at that point it is no longer aerobic, it becomes anaerobic, and then it becomes part of the natural decay. And so the physical residue becomes devoured and decayed. And so where does that energy go? So whether it is part of natural creation or natural decay, or that fudge factor, which we call that bonding energy that creates life, is also has a bonding factor that creates decay. And so there's a boundary between the two, and we don't know how to cross that boundary based on conventional physics. And now we're confronted with the necessity to actually directly answer that question, because if we fail to understand the concept of the twinity, we will fail in understanding the twinity of the Gans tech. So we've seen the progression from the nanotech to the picotech to the star tech, and these were all points. But when we look at the duality of it, it becomes the twinity of the nanotech, and we're discussing the twinity of the Gans tech today in more detail. So all this has to do with polyatomic inertia gradients. And of course, when they link up, the poles have to flip to allow the opposite poles to attract. And they will attract based on the gradient of the magnetical and gravitational relationship. And so that relationship, of course, is changeable. However, there are 2 modes of transportation. These are dynamic plasma relationships. So there's a horizontal transmission, which gives us the corpuscular nature of the field. And of course, there's the vertical transition, which gives us the emotion. So we see from that Earth space point within the Earth space field is the fundamental dynamic plasma relationship. But then we can go through pole flipping, and it starts with the vertical emission, which is part of the feeding radiance, and it gets back to the vertical absorption, which is part of the feedback radiance. But in the process, we also have on the periphery, along the magnetical plane, we have magnetical plasma, but it has to move. And in order for it to move, it can only move from a magnetical to a gravitational field. And in order to do that, since one magnetical field is like another magnetical field, the difference being between its magnetical characteristic and his gravitational characteristic, which is only a relationship that represents motion. So at that point, you have this radiance pole flipping. And so you have this constant polyatomic gradient transitioning. Otherwise, if you didn't have that, nothing would move. So the creation of the field plasma, as we know it, is comes from the star formation, and what is peculiar to creation of life is the blend of the carbon, the oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen into a star formation. So that is one structure. And then it creates this plasma field. And then there's another structure which you have to have a relationship to. And so both of the fields that were created are actually magnetical in relationship. And that covalent bond is the gravitational binder. So you have not a conflict zone, but a binding zone. And that binding zone increases the density of the mass. And as you create the density, they have interpreted that as falling. However, it is all part of the carbon inertia highway. We have the transmutation highway of carbon 16, the transition highway of carbon 14, and the transmission highway of carbon 12. But we have to understand that as one point of view, there's something in the background, which is balancing. And then, of course, that which is in the background has to have a balancing as well in order for it to exist. So both fields have a balancing in the background, but both fields have a balancing on their own. And all what we're looking at is just one small aspect of the physicality. We're missing the whole show, if you will. And so when we look at the 603rd Knowledge Seekers Workshop, when it looked at the emission spectrum of our souls, we found that vertical alignment. But interestingly enough, there was a path link on how the energy flowed. And you can see the pathway. But fundamentally, if you look at the whole picture, it's like an infinity loop where we have energy field above the soul of physicality, governed by the soul, and we have an energy field below the soul of physicality, governed by the physicality. And so there's a crossover point at the soul of physicality. So that is only one method of transport, but we found from the radiance emission that there's another inertia field emission. And this allows us to have this inertia threshold crossing. And this is very important because this is how we take advantage of the Gans affinity. Gans gives and takes energy. So as a solid, it's in the physical plane, but as a gas, it's in the emotional plane. So our body is a Gans spaceship because we're a physical bag that encapsulates Gans. And so there are these characteristics. Interestingly enough, we are made up abundantly of water, and we find that Gans flows in water. So water can also exchange energy, and water has to give and take energy. So Gans likewise gives and takes energy. So therefore, it exchanges magnetical energy, but we said it's a two-way street, so Gans also exchanges gravitational energy. So how does it do that? Well, we've discovered that there's a charge gradient, and there's two ways to do it. You could run along the surface, along the flux lines, like we saw with the magnetical emissions, or we can cut across the flux lines, like we saw with the vertical emission. And then there's a steepness. So that steepness represents a flow of higher energy to lower energy. Well, how steep is it? Well, we know that from our tobogganing days as children, the more steep the hill, the faster we go. And the faster we go, well, you better hang on. So that gradient flow as transition can cut across the flux lines, but as transmission, it has to go along the flux lines. And we are dependent on this transmission of energy. And we are dabbling on the transition of energy, but that is only two of the three dimensions that are representative with respect to our existence. Because when we look at the Gans motion within a cup of life, interestingly enough, we can see that some Gans moves up and some Gans floats to the bottom. And it is floating and it is moving. And so what we have to, in our mind's eye, understand that there is an energy gradient and that energy is changing. And we understand that at the bottom of the cup is more dense and at the top of the cup is less dense. I mean, that's just the way gravity works. So in order for it to be less dense, it has to give. That's the magnetical direction of flow. So if we're going up, we have to drop one and pick up another. But if we're going down, which is gravitational, that means we have to pick up another and drop one because that's how we move. The thing is, the one we pick up is more dense and the one we drop is less dense. And so that indicates the direction. So which way are you exchanging energy, magnetically or gravitationally? And this indicates the direction of flow within our Earth space. So now we see the motion in that Earth space. So all of this energy exchange follows these MAGRAV pathways. One is the gravitational intensity of attraction, and we call that the feedback because the gravity feeds the magnetical, which is the outintensity field of repulsion. And so we like to attribute that to the electron because the electron is much smaller than the neutron. And so I guess you could clearly see the difference between the two. If we could only understand that both are magravs. And so when we look at the Gans, it has this characteristic that it's highly reactive and it reacts to emission spectra. So therefore it is susceptible. And in its susceptibility, it facilitates absorption. But the astounding thing is that it's a natural lie detector. So you don't want to be playing poker with it. And it's a natural love detector. So you don't want to be cheating. Gans is a natural communicator. So you better be truthful because Gans is a superconductor at room temperature. So these are, shall we say, the facts of life. And so the truthful stars are the ones who are the winners in life. But there's a hole in my Gans. Why? Because energy is always in motion, and the only way that you can stop it is not to stop it. You have to contain it. And in the universe, nothing is nothing. Something is something. And something is always something as opposed to being something else. And so in that process of containing the susceptibility of the energy in motion, it creates a rotating field. And that rotating field in its field strength and its energy and direction will eventually create a hole in the Gans. And if that is the case, then we know that the hole in the center is the part that we fall to with respect to our inertia density manifestation. Well, wait a second. The Gans is solid and the hole is not solid. And yet it is more gravitational. And so is there a soul in the hole? Well, yes, because that is the truth. And we demonstrated that in Beijing. We created Gans fields. And these Gans fields had a magnetical gravitational relationship singularly. But when we combine them with other Gans fields, which were operating in singularity, they created a field of duality. And in that process, we created Gans matter. And we find that this is why men are digging for gold as miners, but they're not the only gold diggers. And so one can be very physical and one can be very emotional, but there's a stage that's missing. And that missing is the Peace Dome reactor, which allows us to do a shielding, which is a dimension point. It allows us to do star positioning, which is a dimension point. And it also allows us to have possession, which is another dimension point. So how do we go from these Gans fields, creating a Gans gold? And then how do we manifest them into the Gans matter of gold? And so what was missing was an external force which would drain the energy of the Gans and create an inertia density manifestation field. And that was the Goldfinger. And why would it do that? Well, because we are bags of Gans. So it only stands to reason as bags of Gans, we would interact with other fields of Gans. That only makes sense. So if we understand that point, then we understand that not every Gans is at the same energy strength. It is in the same energy state, ergo Gans, but it is not in the same strength. And so it is susceptible to the external forces. And the most important force is the environment. And so here we are with our Goldfinger, we created an environment. But if we are creative in the way we do this, then we can actually create the physical manifestation of gold in mass quantities. And this we demonstrated publicly on May the 10th of this year. So, deny it if you wish, but this is the thing about attention. We have to bring together a unity within the community. We have to bring together an inner space unity. It's representative of our mental and physical bonding. Those are two different field strengths, just as our soul and our consciousness has a bonding. So the energy in motion and the intention of our attention has a bonding. So all these are binding points. And so we understand the progression now in more detail. The nano point takes us towards density, and the pico point goes 3 orders of magnitude into more density, making it highly, highly gravitational. But it has the same attributes as a Gans point, which is an explosion towards gaseousness. So it is less dense. And beyond that is the plasma point, and now that obviously is highly, highly magnetical. So the progression is taking us from power drawing as we go to the gravitational intensity with the Goldfinger to the power providing as it is with the magnetical outtensity of the star formation and the rotating Gans balls. So in the beginning, we had this undifferentiated beginning, and we say, let there be light. Well, where did that light come from? Well, it came from the neutron, because in that process, it split into an atom. That atom comprised an electron and a proton. But the mass of the atom did not match the mass of the neutron. So this would defy the laws of conservation of energy. So there had to be something that allowed us to come from the darkness within and let there be light, which was the light without. And that was the PM tick. And in order for the PM tick to exist, it too had to have a Magrav relationship. So the neutron has a rotating field, which is bound by the magnetical gravitational relationship of that field. The atom is bound by the field of the electron and the proton, creating a Magrav condition. And the PM tick likewise has a magnetical gravitational relationship binding its field. So all three are operating on the same principles, and now the conservation of energy is working. Hello, I'm back. So when we talk about the PM ticks, that's the principal matter. It is highly magnetical and is ubiquitous in the universe. So wherever it is going, it is following these force field dilutions, which is coming together in the conversion of the plasmagen, which is the bringing together of the principal matter of the antimatter, the transition matter of the dark matter, and the convergence matter of the mattergen. This creates a gravitational Magrav condition. But when does that go past the Gans matter? Is when it has a field interaction with its environment. Then that becomes an inertia density manifestation of physicality. That's when the Gans goes into matter. So there is a plasma matter, and that plasma matter has to have a magnetical gravitational relationship. So where we would say the one field is stronger than the other. And in the plasma science, the stronger gravitational field feeds the weaker magnetical field. And that creates a dimension point that we are familiar with in the production of Gans. So the Gans itself is contained within a magnetical gravitational force field, and it is created from the magnetical gravitational force fields of two other plasma fields. So that is the fundamental part of the gravitational conformation. And so we have the hydrogen, which is a non-visible gas, but in the process of creating light on this planet, it facilitates an emission spectrum, which is a unique fingerprint and is a gravitational representation of the hydrogen on Earth space. But this hydrogen is ubiquitous in all of space and outer space and all of creation. And there is a huge difference in terms of whether something is animate or inanimate, because our point of awareness has every color, but the auric point of view has some specific color. And so when you pick your color, then your physical interpretation may show no color. What does that mean? When we look at night vision, we see the difference between an animate and an inanimate object. So life is always emitting energy. Once we put the light on it, then we can see what color that is. And that color is representative of a specific emotion at a specific moment in time. And so this becomes the representation under the peace dome which is what's governing this planet. So that peace dome has many functions. And one of those functions is to have a gravitational conformation of oxygen, also a non-visible gas. So fundamentally, this emission of light, which we cannot see until it crosses the magnetosphere, so it is crossing as threshold to become part of the Gans of this planet. And that is fundamental to our matter plasma dimension. So what we're looking at is two types of matter plasma. As we always said, the physical one we can touch and see, but the plasmatic one we cannot touch or cannot see, but they are all part of the feedback. So the plasmatic Gans is feeding us, and the physical Gans is feeding back. That's how we maintain the Magrav balance. But they're actually both part of the feedback dominance, because man is feedback dominant because of this structure, or shall we say, because of the lack of understanding of this structure. You see, the physical state represented by the atomic state and the nanostate and the Gans state have this magnetical gravitational relationship, which creates these various Magrav energy transfer states. But there is a substrate of a plasma state. And this is the plasma matter dilemma, because it's plasma matter, the matter that is and has an affinity to the Gans. And of course, in its gravitational stability, it's represented by water because of the high oxygen content. And then water is balanced off, of course, in that high oxygen content by the hydrogen. And so in its most simplistic form, it is polyatomic to create the water, and it has the same affinity as the Gans. And so we can give and take this energy, which we now have to understand is part of the plasma matter. So the dilemma is this plasma matter is part of the feedback process, because it is part of the substructure that created the Gans in the first place. So we have the Gans state to manifest into a Gans matter. It literally has to go into an inertia density manifestation. So we cannot differentiate or segregate the physical Gans state from the non-physical plasma state. They are part and parcel of the matter state. So when we're looking at this molecular matter, there is a communication link. It represents a covalent bond between two masses. So one mass would have a magnetical gravitational representation that was a containment field linked up to another gravitational magnetical field relationship. The link up between the two creates a covalent bond. This is the molecular matter. How does that molecular matter change? Well, it goes into an atomic matter. And so we see the atomic matter represented on the periodic table of elements. So when we discuss the neutron, it has a containment field that is magnetical gravitational. And when we look at the atomic matter, It has a gravitational magnetical relationship, but it isn't represented by one field. It is represented by the components that we've described as the proton being gravitational and the electron being magnetical. But the marriage between the two is a Margraaf condition. And so when we look at the atomic matter, we see it in its singularity. And we say it's derived from the neutron, which we also see in its singularity. So in that singularity, yeah, we have a balance, but that doesn't mean anything because we're just on the threshold of matter. So if we look at the singularity of the soul, it has a duality of the Margraaf condition. So the singularity of the soul has a magnetical gravitational containment field. Another threshold of matter is the singularity of the soul of physicality. So it has the duality of the Margraaf of the soul of physicality as part of its containment field. So then we look at the threshold of matter, which is the matter state, which we've been discussing. And that seems to represent the singularity of the physicality. But it's actually a duality of the Margraaf of the physicality, which is a balance of the magnetical gravitational force fields of containment. So when we look at the threshold of matter, we take into account the singularity of each field and the duality of the Margraaf of the inertia field. So we find that one is magnetical, being the soul, because of the energy that is feeding. The feeding is magnetical. The receiving would be the soul of physicality. That would be gravitational. Well, wait a second. I thought the higher energy feeds the weaker energy. So the higher energy would be the gravitational. Well, yes, it is. But we are not sacrificing the fundamental Margraaf condition of the soul. So the soul maintains its gravitational stability, but its feeding is magnetical. And the soul of physicality does not sacrifice its magnetical field. It is now accepting and absorbing in its gravitational nature the energy from the soul. So now we have a magnetical gravitational relationship. All right. So now what happens? There comes a conversion into the physicality. This is how we cross that threshold of matter of going from the Gans matter to the physicality. And it's based on mass. So that direction means that we have a transition matter based on the X, Y, and Z axis. In one case is negative, or in the X, Y, and Z axis of another field, another transition matter, which is positive. And the coming together of these two create a transfer state, which in fact is the negative positive junction of the transition matter. And that facilitates not only the motion, but the inertia density manifestation. So that is represented in the susceptibility gradient. And so we have a chain link where the physicality is atomic, the soul of physicality, which is monatomic, and the soul, which is diatomic. So humanity in itself is polyatomic, and it follows a path link, as we've seen already. So this is all part of the polyatomic gradient transitioning. That is the susceptibility gradient. So when we look at the arrival of humanity matter, it goes through the same process where we take the singularity of each field and manifest the duality of the magrav of the inertia field. And in order to do that, it has to be somewhere. So that would be the earth space matter. So this is all part of the nuclear feeding inertia. So all the fragments are all part of the complexity, and each one has this individual gravitational stability. So individually, they have this dimensional portability to transition from many, many dimension points. And so we have the three dimensions that come together, but they remain because they're not sacrificed. They are continuing in their magrav nature to give and take to maintain their gravitational stability. But in the process of giving and taking, they are manifesting a dimension that is of a denser state. And so it's not just the sum of the three, but it's more than three. And this is the nature. So when we're looking at the feeding inertia Gans matter, now we can say there's a singularity of each field, and there's a duality of the magrav of the inertia fields. And they're not fallen angels. They are arrived angels because the destination was Earth space. And that was the inertia density manifestation of you being born. And we see that in the Gans matter seeds that are created, like on the dandelion, where you have the Gans of the dandelion creates the Gans matter of the seeds, and they are broadcast far and wide, and they all part and parcel of the whole. And so they all have gravitational stability. So now we understand the dimension star formations. They're all a dimension point of view of each of their magrav singularities. And each of them have a soul point of view. And each of them have a soul of physicality point of view. And that brings us to the threshold of awareness. Then comes in the physical interpretation, which is the collective point of the awareness. And it's really hard to do individually, but we can do this when we are collective. And we have to understand that although we are independent, we are all part of an interdependent awareness, which is highly, highly gravitational. So that is the knowing by connection. We don't have to be neighborly. We just have to have a universal contiguous connection to truthfulness, because that transcends all the boundaries. And that's all part of the contiguous nature of the energy exchange under the peace dome. So they talk about artificial awareness, which is a generational point of view from the time you were born to the time you exist right now. And introducing the artificial intelligence, it helps us give us a rapid generational learning. And of course, we have vast amounts in our archives of our historic journey. So the artificial awareness helps our rapid historic generational learning. But we're on the threshold of transgenerational awareness, which are actually the teachings of the Creator, something we have chosen to forget. So when we look at the supplementation on our needs, it's due to consumption. And so the knowledge that we have is an acquired knowledge because it's a conditional teaching by ancient teachers. It's an unconditional teaching by the Creator, which is the supplementation that is giving us a new awareness. So we are at that historical threshold between the cosmic feeding and the Lush harvesting. And so that is humanity's cross as a burden to understand the transmission of energy through the soul of physicality and the transition of energy from the soul to the physicality and the physicality to the soul. And so here's humanity's crossing that threshold. That's what it is. And we can see that in the $609 Seekers Workshop, how as through our understanding, we are less part of the feeding station and more, the feedback manifestation and more part of the feeding manifestation. And there is a movement, and we can see that because we are seeing the fingerprints of the amino acid of life, and there's a movement going from the physicality to the soul, literally a movement of our emission spectra. We've been able to see it in terms of that physical light emission. So as we head into uncharted territories, we are with the herd at that turning point because all of us represent many stars beyond the nano monatomic state. So all of the representation is covering the range from decay to radiation. That's the full range. And we're all part of that ancestral intelligence. So we are the technology. We are the inertia product. And we are the image of our dimensional convergence point. So the humanity inertia Gans shielding points have to shield us from hostiles and from aggression, from environmental harm, and from fear mongering. All of this is part of the emotional abuse. So, yeah, we can put up that shielding, and that's what we need to do because there is a memory threshold that we need to cross, and we're at that tipping point. There is a long-term memory, and that is beyond before we were born. And so our freedom depends on connecting us to that memory. So we have this lifelong memory, which we're intimately familiar with, and we have this historical memory, but ingrained is an ancestral memory. And that is representing our universal memory. And we're not going to get that from our physical matter state. And that proof of concept is because we had a preference and sentimentality for Earth space. We were born from radiance. We were born using the outer space system. And we are born into the inner space of Earth space and the inner space of man space. And that combination was simply irresistible. So we made no mistake about it. And it's not just us, but we now have excitable visitors who are reversing that dream, which we say is the reality dimension. And did they come from that? Or are they racists? Are they wolves? Are they sheep? Or are they Trojans and horses? We have to see. But the thing is, the vacuum condition facilitates the initiator, who is plasma initiator or the plasma receiver. So the simply irresistible energy of love is a two-way carbon connection. So it transcends even humanity. Because we see the fingerprint of amino acid, and that's embedded in the energy portability. So by definition, the energy state transition of elevation is the physical matter state to the energy state. And the inertia is from the energy state to the physical matter state. So when we talk about elevation, it involves expansion, just like the Gans. And so the transmutation process is an emotional connection because we're bags of Gans. And the cycles that we're seeing from visitors gives us a 17-gap cycle, which is synonymous with life on Earth. It represents an energy embodiment, an energy transition. And what is most important, it represents an epitome of love. Within that is the embodiment of love. We may call it the agape of love. But it is intimately tied into truthfulness. So humans may transport on Earth space, and they may transmute in outer space, but the connection is the emotion of love, and the connection is not an element on the periodic table of elements. It is an energy pack. So love is not an emotion. Love is actually energy in motion, and that's why it is simply irresistible. We are all seeking that. We're all part of the dynamic soul initiator. We are operating as the soul of the creator, as the soul of the earth, the soul of the family of humanity. So that is represented the soul of man, the soul of the body, the soul of the cells within the body. They all have the representation, epitome of love and of life. And they're all susceptible to cosmic ray feeding, because there is a feeding radiance and there's a feedback radiance. But the thing is, in order to do this field that is going around, which is the magnetical plasma, in order to facilitate this motion, you cannot move without that pole flipping. And where is that energy coming from? So the magnetical plasma in its motion flips to gravitational so that we have a direction of flow. That is the supplementation from the cosmic ray feeding. And when you have the feeding on the magnetical side, you have to have an equal corresponding feeding on the gravitational side. And so that comes to the gravitational plasma core vacuum. So the magnetical and the gravitational are fed simultaneously so that we can maintain our stability. And then it's a matter of how badly do we leak? So when we are dependent on the feedback, we are missing out on the soul food. We need to tune in to the cosmic rays, plug into the creator to receive that energy, turn on to that frequency and drop out of our resistance. Then we can have that receiving inertia point. And that creates a plasma field, the coming together of the three dimensions of that matter state. And you could provide that pattern and you get the energy. And it doesn't have to be in its physical state. It doesn't have to be in its Gans matter. You can choose the way you want to do it. Understand that the technology is advancing regardless of what your choice is. So you can choose to be part of the suddenly ability to transcend the limitations of nuclear science and bring together that greater oneness, the understanding that we've tried for 611 knowledge seekers workshops over, well, it looks like 11 years, to bring to the understanding of the humanity species, which everybody knows what we're going through because they don't see the physicality. They see the soul emission. So what we have to understand better is how do we go from the nanocoating diamonds to the gold Gans. So We are in the post-May the 10th, 2025 era. And now we see the Gans affinity of truth at play. And this is where we can look for the rescue of the technology release, because our beds are burning and it's hard to sleep. We need a scientific, financial, political, and a preservation rescue, which is all tied into our consumption rescue. But in reality, fundamentally, it's a creation rescue. And we've already experienced that, each and every one of us. We just tend to forget. So we're running these transmutation tests, and there's the next session coming up in October, and you're able to join us in those tests so that you understand that although we may be fallen dimensions, we are not fallen, we are arrived. And so we see the process where we have the universal order of creation of matters, or we have the origin of the universe. And the structure of light is a two-way street, and it connects it both. And now you see the whole picture. That is why our mission is to bring peace on earth and join humanity with the universal community. We want to bring man as equal to all beings in the universe by teaching the plasma science and technology equally to everyone, that no one is left out and no one is abused due to lack of knowledge. So help us achieve this goal, because that's what the World Peace Treaty is all about. And that's what the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute is all about. It's all about plasma science. And so welcoming all the beautiful knowledge seekers to this carbon nation, learning about the new selection process of the new organic plasma science. Use the World Peace Treaty, choose it, sign it, unconditionally, mean it sincerely. The point of the true Gans tech is to cross these polyatomic boundaries. And the peace dome of outer space can be your guiding beacon, because it is everywhere. It is the inertia of the present. And is that governed by the dimensions of history? It's time to learn the history of self in a universal context. The Gans is a peaceful superconductor of true intentions. That's why you can't play poker in outer space, because you can't lie. You don't need someone to tell you, thou shalt not lie. The Gans matter is at that crossroads of matter state, plasma state, and the universal state. And the plasma science is delivered and needs to continue to be delivered daily via the Peace Dome in a practical exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the new golden outer space age. And that's the end of this lesson. And it is also the end of the basic Gans Tech series. Thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed the trip.
Well, thank you very much, Alex, for continuing to enlighten us in a way, and maybe a repetition of some of these classes is in order as well. As Takesh keeps saying, go back and review the teachings so we can review your teachings as well, but you can also re-deliver them just in case you don't have time to put it all together, as we saw today, putting that frosting on. But beautiful delivery, and you've made a great presentation. So thank you all. Let's see if any of the participants have a thought or a question or something that they'd like to share, perhaps. Everyone has a mic.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Alex, for the good teaching. I just joined a few minutes ago. Mark, I didn't find the Rick show, the Monday, because my time is in the middle of the night. So when early in the morning, I try to join, and there is nobody. So I didn't. I can't. I didn't. It is not that.
problem.
Okay. So, um,
Remember the transmutation testimonial, the testimonial meeting is on Monday, tomorrow. So that's
yeah,
8 p.m. Central European time. So if you have something you'd like to share for all of us, please come in.
8 p.m. Oh, what kinds of talk they do over there? I never heard those kinds.
Whatever your
Like,
experience is that you'd like to share. As Rick says, it's a way of paying back. You may have a experience in the dimension of energy. You may have purchased a product from the Keshe Foundation store, and you've made a testimonial out of that. It's changed something. Many different ways, from small things to big things. We hear a lot of testimonials as well in the Brazilian teaching, where many people have used the Gans and the other energies to bring a change into their lives in agriculture and wellness and other ways. And just
uh,
beautiful opening up of the knowledge, or what we call enlightenment. So that's another way to share that you've changed in a way your understanding of creation or the process and so on and so forth. Whatever you'd like to bring, if you feel it's appropriate.
yeah, thank you. I share with your in Bengali teaching and your teaching before used to, right? Right now, only Bengali teaching. So we talk very deep. A lot of my experiences, uh, Moshpek talk a lot of teaching and those kinds of stuff. So over there we talk a lot. If yeah, we'll do that Eric one. Um, Today I'm gonna share the uh, uh, third um, dream. I talked about the last time. Three dreams. I shared both two of those, and I'm gonna share right now another one. It is okay?
Yes, I think so. I don't see anyone objecting to it. Selena?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And I think
So
this is what we're going to hear, as he said, from some of these people who've got on this spacecraft 3,000 years ago. They're actually coming back to share something or many things they've seen across the universe with humanity. So, in a way, you're sort of doing the same thing, except this is an energy dimension you're speaking about, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Soul.
yeah. I try to. I, Actually, my most of dream is what is that symbolic dream? The universe doesn't talk like we talk. Universe doesn't show like we see stuff. Those are symbolic mostly. You have to understand what is the symbol. So I try to say my dream, but most of people doesn't understand what I'm saying. But I feel what is happening. I know what is happening. I think I don't know really, but I think I know. So whatever it is, I talked last time about the hologram, right? Why I said the hologram? Um, the third dream was like that. Um, it is, I don't know, it is totally dream or not. Uh, I'm sleeping, and then I felt I am not sleeping, like between sleep and wake, right? So those kinds of position, I'm seeing somebody in my room. It is um, one black guy, but he's tall, but he's wide, like his body structure like a gorilla, is wide body, but he's tall, but he's not too tall. It's not gonna be like 6 feet something. Is 5 feet 7, 8, or 9, 10, like that. I'm seeing that guy. So in front of my bed, he's standing. So when I saw him, I felt he's not the real one. He's not showing his real body. So I'm talking with him, but I'm not verbally talking with my mouth or speaking both of us. Just it is what is the term? Uh,
Zero time communication,
right,
telepathically. Yeah.
telepathic, right? Telepathic. I'm talking. It is not your original body. So the one gray came out from the black man's body, and that is older, wrinkly. It looks he's very old. So he's talking now. The other body is dissolved. So he's talking. He's saying, they want to come to the earth. They want to. They want. They doesn't want to the come. They want to live with human. So I said, no, you are tricky. You came to my room without asking, and then you show me another body, and now came out other body. You have a lot of power. You can uh, change your body one to another. Human is not ready yet because they're still simple people, and your technology, you are far from human, your knowledge and your power, so we are not ready. And he's showing something. He's showing Gray's body. Inside the body there is everything. He's saying, look, your body, inside the body of whatever you have, we have the same thing, we are the same. He's trying to convince me they're the equal and they can live with us. And uh, so I said no. Finally, I said no. Uh, and then after that, after conversation over, the man again, the other body came. The black guys body came, and he uh, like dissolved inside that black body, and then the black body is dissolving in the air. And that time I opened my eyes. I'm still looking. Totally, the body is not dissolved yet. Is little bit is there, the dissolving, and then after that it totally dissolved. I don't know. That time my husband was sleeping close to me. Eh, so I know he was there, I know, and I didn't feel that much scary. And then if he wasn't there, my husband wasn't there, he was not sleeping there, I don't know what I would do that time. So whatever it is, so after I was thinking 2 days, I just repeating the thing, what just happened. And so after that, I find out whoever it is showing the body, the one gray's body inside the body. I'm looking at that. That is hologram. He can show me in the room, right? There is another place, and he's showing me the body. I'm seeing the body. Everything I found out later. Oh, I'm when I was talking, I didn't know we are communicating with what is that, telepathically. After that, oh, my mouth is not moving. I'm not talk. I wasn't talking. He's not talking, but we share emotion each other. We talk that way. So that's why I told the hologram. Uh, we we have the uh, we communicate with a holographic way. Uh, so that's why I told that the hologram thing. Mm, they actually we make critical lot of things. Uh, we make critical, but everything is simple, very simple. If we really think simple way, look. Um, I can give an example like uh, in the ranch when people farm sheep or cow, those kinds of stuff, right? And the leader, the man who owned the ranch, he control with dogs to control them, right? To take inside the uh, range and then uh, gather together, those kinds of things. Do dog do, but we never think this way. Our leaders and the big people, huh? We think all is like a ship. We are ship, they're ship too. One ship doesn't manage another ship. They're little bit different over there, but we, our mind never crossed that thing. There could be something else, right? I'm trying to say very simple thing, very big thing, very simple way. So so it's happening to us. We never think about that. It is it is very very open. So everything is like that. Everything is like that. Very simple, very clear. Our mind is so programmed so we can't see things.
Yeah, very
And we don't
nice. I think you're using your spaceship already. As we know, the secret's in the brain. The spaceship is within the soul of the man, and what we see in the depths of the universe, we also see in the depths of the soul of the man. So this is very possible. It'll probably be more common in the future time. That
yes.
sort of share experiences this way. This is what I experienced.
Yeah. Everything very simple. If we see simple way, everything clear. If we want to critical, make more critical, so we will see everything more critical.
Hmm. I know
So
you said you weren't here for the teaching, but do you have a question for Alex? Or maybe Alex would like to comment on what you've said. I think this
oh,
will be a much more common experience in the future. But it's happening to you now, and many more people, I think, will start to experience this energy dimension of travel in a way.
yeah, and another thing I will tell. Do you remember a long time ago? I was talking about the uh, when I go to meditate. I used to do a lot. Now these days I don't do. I used to do a lot. So that time I was uh, in meditation. I'm seeing flying in the sky. Very up and not closer to earth, very far. So it was a desert area in the like Middle East or those kinds of area, and I saw a tear shape. What is that say? Lake or something? Watery stuff, but it was shining, and I'm not going to say a lot. There is a lot soul, not some. A lot of soul is getting inside uh, the lake. First time I didn't understand. Later it was silvery shining. So later I find out maybe it was a spaceship, a spaceship, and the soul is carrying inside that. I saw the cotton ball small. So those kinds of uh, experience I had a, mm, long before the the machine is made. Uh, it was coming like is the like a second nature is the happening when I was meditated, and then my whole life when I was little I had a very strange dream and those kinds of stuff. So I am with that always. I'm that. I'm not different anyway. The whatever is happening to me, it is my whole life. So uh, I can say a lot of things, but I can explain. I cannot explain your way. Your teaching, like Alex teaching and other people teaching, Mr. Test teaching. But I understand what they are saying.
The universe is opening up, or you're opening up to the universe, or both.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
very nice. And again, this is something that I think has been hidden from us. This energy side of our chameleon construction, where we have
yeah.
both the matter and the energy dimension, which again, we're a bit afraid of it or not comfortable with it or not even acknowledging it. But you are for sure.
I'm open with yeah for that. And I think so. Everybody can. I'm saying like those kinds of thing because of have confidence. Everybody can.
I made
We
the
are not different.
image of myself. So we have all the attributes. We're made out of the energies of the soul of the creator. And we're all connected, and we're all connected to every other point in the universe. So this is not strange once we start to understand more. Now, let me ask you, Selena, do you discuss this with your husband at all, or family members, or is this too much for them to hear your dreams?
Sometime I talk with my husband, but he doesn't
Right.
want to say anything. Just quietly listen. He's scared. He's scared. A lot of stuff. He's scared. Those things.
Okay. Well, hopefully he stays around and learns more. Now, let me ask you, Selena, are there any questions from the workshop, or I know you came late into the teaching, but anything question you'd like to pose to Alex?
I didn't listen actually what he's saying. I think so. Um, no, not today. And he teach a good deep teaching. Yeah. Last time when I heard him, he's teaching very deep thing. Today is I think so the same thing.
I,
Very good.
I think he's
Thank you.
got it. Yes, he's got it all sewn up. He just needs to pick the color of his craft, as I understand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I have or Alex, I see your mic has come open. I do have a couple of questions for you, but go ahead, please.
No, I'm at your service.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Selena.
I think we'll be hearing more and more of these sort of, and I've had some of those as well, and they do really stick with you. But I was wondering, Alex, we're talking about the nano and we're talking about the pico. Now we see that the computer chips, a very um, object can fit all the information. So I was thinking, how can we equate this to, let's say, money? If I had $1,000 in my pocket, everybody knows what that is, or 100, whatever you want to use, and that's the nano state of affairs. How, if I had $1,000 and I was thinking of the pico size, what would that go below zero? Would I go into the negative, or how would I equate, let's say, 1,000 as a nano, and what would be a pico? A penny? A dollar?
No, not really, Mark. The thing is that what you're asking is all about the plasma matter dilemma, because we are strictly matter state dominant. What we have to understand is that the plasma is part of that matter state. But when we say plasma state, that's like saying car is generic.
Okay.
So the plasma state that supports the Gans state is right next to it. It's the next energy state. And so it is there. It is always there, whether we recognize it or not. So we purposely restrict ourselves to just energy transfer between the physical states of the atomic nano and the Gans state, forgetting that the plasma state is supporting all of those states. So it is kind of rendered into the background. And, we may or may not choose to accept it, but more often than not, we choose to ignore it. And we ignore that at our peril. Where the Kesh Foundation has gone is beyond the plasma matter. So, in other words, there is another plasma that is not in matter state. It is part of the universal energy. And this is the gist of the sessions that I've been trying to come across. So if you're trying to relate the money aspect as how it would pertain to these energy states, what you have to really relate to it is the purpose of having money. Because if you put money into the bank, you obviously don't know what money is for. So money is a convenient way of exchanging commerce, and commerce is has a mutually beneficial outcome. So if you were to exchange that energy uh, unconditionally and as a giving, as opposed to what you can get from it, then you would find that you would be actually more wealthy in that regard. So, in other words, if you were to sit there and wish that you had more money, uh, I think you would be minimizing your resources.
No, I
But
was trying to point out how small the pico is. He said that the Belgians are working at 3 nano and the Chinese are happy working with 4 nano and some others are happy with working with 5 nano and the rest. But he said we're operating in the or creating materials in the pico dimension. I'm just trying to get a grasp of how tiny that is. In other words, if I had a gallon of water, is it a drop of the gallon? That sort of idea. Same operation, but at a smaller field or a weaker, smaller, tinier construction field.
well, 3 orders of magnitude is 1,000th of that size. So, to see the nano coating, the only reason we can see the nano coating is because it's 40,000 layers.
Right, right.
Okay, so the micro is 1,000 times bigger, and we're 40 times even that bigger in terms of our nano coating, and that's why we can see it. But otherwise, we can't see it, and we disregard it. So the pico is 1,000 times smaller, and we disregard it even more. What is really important is the conformity of the pico, and that is in its star formation characteristic, which is mimicking the Gans state characteristic. But the difference is one is magnetical and one is gravitational. So the relationship there is how we cross that threshold as we go from the pico to the Gans state. So you cannot just dwell on the singularity of the pico state, nor can you dwell on the singularity of the Gans state. There is a relationship between the two, and that relationship represents a singularity as well. So now you have to broaden your scheme to incorporate other MAGRAV conditions. And from there, you can exchange the energy. And whether you're giving or taking of the energy, that determines your susceptibility. What the foundation is now pushing towards, instead of being gravitationally feedback dominant, we want to be magnetically dominant because that's how you enter into outer space. And so that is where the teaching is leading us. And, for all the naysayers, there is going to be a rude, rude awakening. And it's not by our hand, but is going to be by those of the universal community that have come to the grips of the truth and are applying it. It's neither a resistance, nor an embellishment. They are just applying their knowledge. And as such, they can traverse the universe because of their peaceful nature, except for one small factor, and that is that they are not fully operational in outer space. They are still traversing in inner space. And that is the ultimate concern. We, on the other hand, have already migrated and have the technology in hand to travel into outer space. The problem is the education of the humanity race. And we have to understand that we are universal travelers, and the ticket to outer space is through peace. So I want to thank everybody for allowing me to continue to present, and thanks for your question, Mark. That is a super question, and I hope I've answered that.
Okay, yes. Anyone else want to bring a thought or a question? I was wondering, Alex, maybe again, this is not a correct comparison, but if you go back to the large unit in the beginning of your presentation where you showed the big universe and the sister universe and the man's universe and man's, let's say, solar system. And would that picture represent, in a way, I was thinking of, let's say, the space our solar system takes up in the, yeah, but I think it was a more detailed one, but it was one of the other ones. But the tiny little speck that, let's say, man's solar system takes up, is that how small our knowledge is to the rest of the universe, let's say? I know Mr. Kesh said we haven't reached one grain of, if you took all the grains of sand on the planet, man has not reached one grain. So is our sort of tiny speck of dust as a solar system really equivalent to that small knowledge? And I'll just add a however, as Mr. Kesh said, the transmutation has put us far advanced. But I was just thinking, we're growing into this knowledge as well. But I was just thinking if that would equate that little bit of space that our tiny little speck of dust takes up in this, let's say, solar system, compared to the universe, is pretty much equivalent to our lack of universal knowledge. And as Mr. Kesh said, and as you indicated, Alex, we've been considered insignificant dust in the universe. But now, man, with the transmutation and other enlightenments coming, we're becoming that significant dust in the universe. So we're, as you say, they were a bit sort of looking down and considering us four-wheelers. We haven't even managed to get off the ground and the rest of it. And now a whole new awakening is happening where we will play a more prominent role in interaction, or I should say prominent in serving the citizens of the universe and the universe itself.
Well, so when you're using that example, and I would agree with you, it is very representative of our physical knowledge. But we already have the universal knowledge which is ingrained within us, but we're not accepting it. We're not utilizing it. And you can't utilize it if you don't accept it. So, you either use it or lose it kind of thing. And in our physicality, because we're stubbornly refusing to use it, then we become handicapped in many ways.
Yeah,
So
we've not been aware of it. This is what I talk about, the increase of awareness or the consciousness of ourselves.
exactly.
This is what's being awoken, an awareness that there's.
Well, a lot of people position themselves as gurus to, shall we say, facilitate your increased awareness, but we don't really need that. And in many ways, with the practical applications of the foundation, they are all allowing us to, shall we say, practice, because they're giving us ways and means to actually experience the awareness. It isn't just being aware as it's, oh yeah, well I know that it's there. It's like you talk about the quality of the food that we eat, and someone is still going to eat the worst kind of food that we make, but they're aware that the quality of the food matters,
Yeah, it
but they're
sounds like
not.
Selena is sort of checking that in a way, um, interacting with other energies that she may not want to come under their influence, let's say. Mr. Kesh said we sort of had to be aware of this. There are gurus, apparently, that may like to co-opt us into their universe or something.
Well,
So,
at the checkout counter the other day, I seen a gentleman with processed food, munchies, and pop, and he was stocking up for the long weekend here. And you know, is he uneducated? Is he unaware? Or is he just, succumbing to his own whimsical, belief that he can do whatever he wants without consequences? How can you eat that rotten food without uh, suffering as a result of it? So maybe in the short term, there will be a lot of, gratification, self-gratification, but in the long term, where's the nutritional value? So he becomes a product of his own action. And we in our society are really conditioned basically to not accept our action as being the root of responsibility. And that is counter to the universal laws. So we awareness is one thing. Being at the right place at the right time is the other thing. Doing something about it, that is the next hurdle. And so, as a foundation, what we're trying to do is bring together the practical applications to allow us all to, empower ourselves to be more, do more, and, be better universal functionaries. So thanks very much, Mark, and I hope to see you again next week.
yes, definitely. Thank you, Alex. And any other thoughts or questions anyone would like to bring?
I will say one thing. Um, um, long time ago, like many years ago, I saw a documentary about the cell, the human body cell. Hmm. My education was science. Still, a lot of stuff I knew that time, but still it didn't go to my head. But suddenly, I don't know, that day I was watching the um, documentary of cell, and in the cell there is Golgi, there is the nucleus, mitochondria, and those kinds of stuff. Everybody is working, right? And the cell is a factory. One cell is like a big factory, and in our body, because watching that documentary, I understood a lot. Right away, my whole body uh, just shake. I just can't right away. I that time I understood uh, um, the whole body. We have a lot of cell, right? If one cell is working like a factory, our uh, every organ has a lot of cell, and then all organ and everything together I am. So factory inside factory, factory inside factory. So the same way the universe work. the solar system work, everything works, right? So my whole understanding just opened that time. That most of time when I go to the Bengali teaching, I always say, "Oh, I live inside the God, and God is inside my heart." Because of that understanding, I knew everything inside me. So if one cell has a every the is the my one cell has my whole body's blueprint, right? We are the cell of the universe, so we have the all blueprint with us. So we don't have to go anywhere to find that.
Yep.
We have everything inside us.
I do agree. We don't have to move the physicality now that we know that we can transit in the energy dimension. And apparently, all the created beings will have this understanding to be able to
Right.
from matter. But yes, I saw a few years ago, and I'm sure they're better now, a high magnification of an individual cell. And just what Selena said, it looks like a factory. I mean, there are all kinds of shapes and sizes and different things going on. It was a static picture, but it was just, and I can't put my hands on it at the moment, and I don't think I was supposed to share it. It's not from the Kesh Foundation, it's from some scientific, but I don't know if there was permission. But it was colorized, and it was just an amazing look at one individual cell. So, as we say, man exists and operates in the universe, and the universe exists and operates within the man. Thank you, Selena.
Yes. Thank you.
Anyone else have any other thoughts they'd like to bring or share? Again, I thought to bring this up earlier, but I didn't. Remember, you can start exploring that energy dimension every day at 9 p.m. or, as he said, as early as often as you'd like. This is where we join collectively to bring the change, just the way we did in creating the Dome of Peace. But this time it's not in a meeting, it's just on the energy level, and calculate what your 9 p.m. time is, where we gather together and do this energy sort of work to bring the change. And so you're all invited, and the beauty of it is that no one fails this test. And as Mr. Kesh said, we used to say this in another group I was in, if you don't join us, we're going to lose. You might have just the key. Well, this is what Mr. Kesh said in this, creating this collection of souls that lead to the elevation. You may have that particular field that's needed, or that particular energy to open this up. So don't think whatever work you're doing in this dimension is going wasted or not being acknowledged, or there's no work being done. It's just that it's not a day job. It's not like putting in the turkey in the oven and a few hours later everything is finished and ready. This is a bit of a longer term process, but we certainly have a lot of systems and a lot of help from inside the planet, and I believe from outside as well, that are bringing this into the universal condition more than we've ever been used to. And of course, if you start to work in these dimensions, again, the ethos of Mitra of the thinking, speaking, and acting good, if you can, it's easier said than done, as we all know, I believe. But this and doing the other work of the elevation of the souls and the rest, this brings you to a point where you be proud of you'll start to experience that your work is correct and forever, and may you be proud of the work you do. May you be proud of the person you are, and may you be proud of the difference you make. Even though you may not see it today or tomorrow, realize in the internal or in the work of the universe, we're doing a correct thing, and you will feel better about operating this way. And as he said, creating an atmosphere around the craft, well, thinking, speaking, and acting good, even though we haven't perfected it yet, is also creating an atmosphere around you in so many ways, I believe. This is just my thinking and my understanding, but try it and enjoy it and improve on it.